10, 11, 12, 13, jump, 14, all right, 15, well done. Our rest time starts now. Our rest time starts now. Breathe in and out, in and out. All right, all right. Walk around, walk around, walk around. Our time's up. Our time's up. All right. Let's go for the next set. Let's go for the last set. 1, 2, 3, and go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Well done, well done. Our rest time starts now. Our rest time starts now. Breathe in and out. In and out. So the next workout we're going to do is mountain climbers and planks. Yes, mountain climbers and planks. So we're going to do 30 seconds mountain climbers, 30 seconds plank, 30 seconds mountain climbers, and 30 seconds plank. So I'll just shift my timer down here, alright? And I'll demonstrate first of all mountain climbers. You do that. 1 foot, let me demonstrate this way, that. The only reason I'm doing facing this way is so that I'm not able to piece my mat, alright? So you can do it whichever way you're able to get space. We're going to do 30 seconds of that and 30 seconds of plank. So a good plank is where your backbone is kind of straight, alright? Which will put you in around this position there. Not doming too much, not sunken, but there. So make sure you hold your backbone alignment as parallel to the ground as possible and hold that core. We got 30 seconds to do that. So we're going to start the mountain climbers. 1, 2, 3, and go. Fifteen more seconds to go, keep going. 10 more seconds. 5 more seconds. Keep going, keep going. Time's up. Time's up. We're going for the plank. Are you ready? 1, 2, 3, and go. Hold it. We have 15 more seconds. 15 more seconds. Five more seconds. And time's up. Time's up. Well done. Rest time 30 seconds. We have a 30-second rest time. And 2 more sets to go. 30 seconds rest time. Walk around. 10 more seconds to go. 5 more seconds. And time's up. Time's up. Mountain climbers. 1, 2, 3, and go. More seconds. Keep going, keep going, keep going. 5 more seconds. And time's up. Time's up. We go for planks. 1, 2, 3, and go. Remember, your back should be parallel to the ground. Fifteen more seconds to go. 15 more seconds. 5 more seconds. 5 more seconds. And time's up. Time's up. Time's up. Our rest time starts now. If you're doing this with me, definitely you are already sweating. You are already feeling it. Remember, do not feel limited by the timing we put here. You could as well do 40 seconds, 1 minute. Challenge yourself. If 30 seconds is too little, challenge yourself and just get something that is challenging for your body. If you've been doing this for 2 minutes, why not, you know? Time's up. Time's up. Let's go. Set number 3 and of course the last set. 1, 2, 3 and move. Keep going, 10 more seconds. 5 more. Keep going. And time's up. Time's up. Let's go for the plank. 1, 2, 3 and go. You have 15 more seconds left. 15 more seconds. Don't break. It's the last set you gotta fight. 10 more seconds. 5 more seconds. And voila, you did it. You did it. You made it through that workout. You made it through that workout. Well done, well done. Now, what we're going to do next? Yes, what we're going to do next? We're going to pick one of our water bottles, yes, and do some Russian twists, yes, for the obliques. We do some Russian twists for the obliques. So if you're in a gym environment, you could as well pick some weight around there so that we can do this together. All right, we're going to do 12 on each side. So when you go this and this will be 1. We're going to do 12 times 3. So when I mean Russian twist, we're we're going to do that, that. Nice and slow, because we are carrying weight. Remember the last time we did Russian twists? We basically didn't have much weight. Today we have quite a bit of weight, and this water bottle is bulky in itself. So I hope I won't be able to topple over. Let's do this together because, whew. Let's go. 1, 2, 3. Lift your leg off the ground. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Well done, well done. If you did that with me, you made it. If you toppled over a couple of times, it's okay. It could happen to me, but we held on, right? So the next set, you just have to try a little bit harder to try and balance with your core. You're trying to lift those legs, and I know they're a bit wobbly from the mountain climbers, but that's the whole point, so that you shift weight from your legs and it moves to your core, right? So that you can hold with your core. We have 5 more seconds of rest. 5 more seconds. Time's up. We're going for our next set. Next set. Pole, pole, slowly. So, you hold this here, then gently lift your leg up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Well done. Well done. You have 1 more set of that. 1 more set of trying just to balance using your core, your legs burning. I know, but it feels so good. I'm feeling like they're starting to get tighter down there. I don't know about you, but it's feeling like it's getting better. Yeah, it's getting tighter and tighter. Set number 3. We're going for set number 3. Last set. Set number 3. 1, 2, 3, and go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Well done, well done. If you completed that workout with me, clap for yourself, because girl, that wasn't easy, but every bit of it is worth it, right? So I'm going to demonstrate the next workout. We're going to do bicycle crunches. So let's put this on the side. As we rest, we're going to do bicycle crunches. We have 5 more seconds to go. And time's up. Our time's up. Remember, you're watching us here from TZ Nyumbani. My name is Evelyn Wala of Evolve Health and Fitness. You can check us out on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter as Evolve Health and Fitness. Meanwhile, I'll demonstrate the bicycle crunches, what we're gonna do. So, we're going to do that one. Alright, then we do one on the other side. Are we together? So we're going to do 10 of those. 1, 2, 3, and go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. The other leg, let's go, let's go, let's go. You got this. 1, 2, 3, and go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Oh, that is quite something. That is quite something. All right, our rest time starts now. Our rest time starts now. I don't know if I'm the only one, but every time I work out my abs, I feel like there should be a mirror right in front of me because of the burn that it feels. I mean, I want to see if I'm getting the abs in real time. But well, it is what it is. 1 rep at a time until we get there, right? Good. Let's go for set number 2. Are you ready? All right, back to the ground. There we go. Oh, right. Let's go. 1, 2, 3, and go. To the knee. 1, to the knee. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Let's go. 8, 9, 10. Oh, we're doing 10. Let's go to the other leg. 1, 2, 3, and go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Whew. That's burning. It's burning, it's burning, but I love it. I love the burn. Rest starting now. Our rest time starts now. Our rest time starts now. All right. I don't know if you're feeling your abs, but I'm feeling I'm getting tighter. Five more seconds to go. 5 more seconds to go. And our time's up. Let's go for the next set. The last set of that workout. The last set of that workout. Let's go. Let's back to the ground. Let's do this. Let's do this, my people. 1, 2, and 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Nice. Let's go to the other leg. Are you ready? I know you are. You just don't want to admit it. Let's go. 1, 2, 3, and move. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Well done, well done. If you did that with me, you did so well. You did so well with that. You did very, very well. All right. Well done. Our rest time starts now. Walk around. Walk around. Walk around, walk around. We're about to do, we're going to do one set basically of the next workout for the obliques. One set of 20, 20. That would be our last workout for the day for our abs. So just pull a chair there or something to hold. It doesn't have to be a chair. So we're going to do side crunches. 1, 2, 3, and move. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. The other side, remember, it's just a single set, but you can do 3 sets if you can. It's just that we're running short of enough time to do it. Let's go. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, keep going. 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Now, here's the deal. Run to the mirror. Go check if these babies are out. If they're not out, maybe you should do this often. Have a lovely day. My name is Evelyn Oala of Eval Health and Fitness, and thank you for joining us here on Tizi Nyumbani. We hit them abs. Have a lovely day until our next episode. Bye-bye.
Jerusalema, ikayalami, ilondoloze, uhambe nami.
NTV brings you loads of exciting shows to keep the young ones busy as they learn.
My name is Mary. What do you like to do, Mary? I like to dance with you. Let's dance! Kipi kiku si chako. Kipi tiku shiki.
Kipi kiku si chacho.
It's okay, you find a way, just use your brain.
Ooh.
We may be young, but we are so strong.
Tune in every weekday from 9 a.m. and Saturday from 7:30 a.m.
We may be young, but we are so strong.
Finding meaningful stories takes more drive and passion. Fathers' involvement in maternal and reproductive health is slowly becoming a game changer.
Getting to the truth takes more determination.
Hakuna. Nilikuwa kilio changu ni watoto wanapata shida chakula. Lakini nimeona Kenya yetu watu wamenishika mkono.
Finding real solutions takes more understanding.
Shortage of teachers, lack of textbooks.
Afadhali mtoto awe chini ya miti badala ya awe na chupa ya glue kwa mapua.
And NTV investigates leads to impact.
This building here has got its fair share of criminals.
Who are these COVID billionaires?
Corruption related to PPE, it's actually a murder.
So these are patients with cerebral palsy.
From what I saw being aired in NTV, it really broke my heart.
NTV, stories that impact you.
Oh yeah, angoni Papa Charles Papa wana nimejitwanga quarantine nikiwa na bibi na watoto ndani ya kesi yake. Kitoko tu tunalamba unga hapa tukirarua uji na mboka ninzike. Sasa shida ango ni kwamba last born rangu hamsambati. Hamelamba hand sanitizer yote bwana. Yote. Ati kwa sababu inakaa kama yogurt. Kwa kama ya findu vikholanga without your knowledge. Na ni juice tu pia hamekula sapuni ati kwa sababu.
To get last born by audio motivation, dial *811*929#. Skiza, Non-Nation.
Taking stock of the Sandbox regulatory framework.
Many have argued that it is a belated attempt by regulators such as CMA to try and catch up with the blockchain and crypto-backed assets.
Can the Sandbox regulatory framework boost product innovation in Kenya's capital markets?
We've been testing things to do with securities lending and borrowing platforms, for example, crowdfunding platforms. You are looking at tokenization of assets.
In the next edition of Business Redefined, we have a conversation with the manager for corporate approvals at the Capital Markets Authority for a focus on this and more.
This is NTV.
Good morning, East Africa, and thank you for joining us on this journey in which we keep exploring the various dynamics of your world. And now they say a happy employee makes for a happy employer. Question is, are you happy at your place of work? Does your employer consider investing in employee welfare? Have you had to leave your employer due to lack of the same? Well, this morning we speak to stakeholders in the world of work and explore how best we can safeguard the well-being of employees. My name is Gladys Gashanja. Let's get down to business. What can employers do to cushion their employees and their businesses during the pandemic? We find out. Was this wrongful termination compensation more than meets the eye? We talk about that too. A Hong Kong workers' union says the airline's workforce was fired because of politics and not the pandemic. In India, the pandemic has forced children to go to work as the pandemic makes things worse. Thank you for joining us on this broadcast. As I mentioned, we are focusing on employee welfare. So our question of the day to you is, have you ever been fired unfairly? What happened, and did you seek any legal help? Would like to hear your experiences. That hashtag New Normal on our social media platforms, and do remember you can reach us on that number at the bottom of your screen with your text messages. But before we get to all that, let's take a look at the numbers as they stand this morning in as far as the effects of COVID-19 around the world is concerned. And this morning, 43,776,586 confirmed cases globally. Out of that number, 32,179,652 have totally recovered from the same, and unfortunately we have lost 1,164,515 people to COVID-19 around the world. Now take a look at some of those numbers in as far as the Kenyan scene is concerned. I had it right here, but it seems to have disappeared. But then again, we shall keep you updated on the numbers of the same as and when we receive them. For now, let's take a look at some of the stories making headlines this morning. And Cameroon was in shock on Sunday after a massacre at a school in the English-speaking southwest of the country, which the government has blamed on separatist militants.
I lack words to express the feeling I had when I saw the corpses of these innocent children. Like a father, I think I would not have remained indifferent when I saw their lifeless bodies lying in the mortuary. Even from the school itself. Oh, it was a sad situation.
United we stand, divided we fall. United we stand, divided we fall. So let us be united, Kumba people, and take away anger from our society. Yes, they are our children. We are ready to receive them back to town as good boys and girls so that we can collaborate together with them. But not this kind of activities.
Elsewhere, the backlash against President Emmanuel Macron's comments on Islam intensified Sunday, with Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan again urging him to have mental checks and protests in Muslim-majority nation. Now speaking after teacher Samuel Paty was beheaded for showing caricatures of the Prophet Muhammad to pupils in a lesson on free speech. Earlier in this month, Macron vowed France would not give up cartoons and said Paty was killed because Islamists want our future. But President Erdogan has urged Macron to have mental checks for treating millions of members from different faith groups this way, comments which prompted Paris to recall its envoy to Ankara. Relations between Macron and Erdogan have become increasingly strained over geopolitical issues ranging from a Greek-Turkish maritime dispute to the conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Now back in the continent, and supporters of a ruling Chama cha Mapinduzi, that is CCM party, gather in Zanzibar for their last rally ahead of presidential elections. And Zanzibar's President Ali Mohammed Shein is stepping down after serving 2 terms, and the ruling party candidate is Hussein Ali Hassan Mwinyi, son of former Tanzanian President Ali Hassan Mwinyi.
Tunategemea mabadiliko makubwa sana hata katika sekta ya uchumi, katika sekta za ajira. Kwa sababu mheshimiwa ameshatuelezea kwamba katika mambo ambayo amevipa kipaumbele ni swala la ajira kwa vijana, na hicho ni kilio kikubwa hasa kwa sisi wa Zanzibari. Tunatarajia ambayo tumekuwa tukifikiria kwa muda mrefu sana ukosefu wa ajira, na yeye katuahidi kwamba ataboresha katika sekta hiyo. Kwa hiyo tunategemea mambo mazuri sana katika kila sekta, na hasa katika kukua kwa uchumi wetu wa Zanzibar.
It's because ACT, they just started many years ago, but we didn't see anything what they can do. They just promised us that they don't do nothing. But for them, like the previous president, he promised us he can just build the road, we see it. He can just build the hospital, we see it. And he can just build the schools, and we see it.
Several thousands of people ransack and loot a government food warehouse in the central Nigeria town of Jos as a wave of social unrest hits Africa's most populous country. Now, in Nigeria, after looting hit Lagos and Ede in the country's southwest, crowds of people raided a warehouse in Jos, storing supplies that were meant to be distributed using or during lockdowns imposed to control the virus pandemic.
Then they corner here, go put here. People they there for hunger, and they lock us inside room. If we can see it here, it's clear. So these people don't use our head, tire. What is it, you
Where 3 decades after the fall of apartheid, the murder of a white farmer manager has laid bare racial frictions that persist in a South Africa weighed down by the triple challenges of rampant crime, unemployment and inequality.
We are here because white arrogance displayed itself on this street. We were here to confront it toe to toe.
The demographics of our farming community is still predominantly white for historical reasons. But there are an increasing number of emerging black farmers, and I include colored and Indian farmers in that broad category. And of course, the workers on farms are predominantly black workers.
Where were you? Where were you?
It's from bad to worse now at the moment, because now the killing sometimes, they kill you. They don't just take your sheep or your stock only. The killing is also there.
The blood was here, and they pulled him with the rope, with that piece of black rope. He was fastened to this.
We are not here
to talk. We are here to show physically enough is enough.
We must always stay positive. Things will go better.
Back home and to the focus of our conversation this morning. If I gave you a shilling, what would you do with it? Can you buy anything with it? Well, the Labour Court gave former Principal Secretary in the Youth and Gender Affairs Ministry, Lilian Omolo, 1 bob as compensation for having been unfairly dismissed from her job following the NYS scandal. Now, the former PS has been in and out of court seeking to clear her name and get access to her accounts that the court believes to hold the proceeds of crime. The 1 shilling awarded by the court may be all she can access, as Charity Mwangi reports.
The cold sound of a shilling is what is expected to hit the account of former Youth and Gender Principal Secretary Lilian Bogo Omolo. After a spirited fight in a Labour court case, this is all Lilian Omolo will take home. While the judge appeared to have agreed with her that her dismissal from office was unfair, the court ruled that she receives nominal damages of just a shilling. So much for all her troubles. It is likely that her expenses in legal fees will have to be settled from other sources. It is the view of the court that while Omolo suffered a legal wrong, there was no actual financial loss. Omolo's woes began in 2018 when she was accused of being part in the infamous NYS scandal that saw the government lose at least 1.8 billion shillings. Alongside others, she's said to have benefited from unlawful allocation of tenders to mysterious companies. She was also accused of making cash deposits worth millions of shillings in bank accounts belonging to her children within months after the theft of funds at NYS was made public. During her trial, Omolo complained of multiple health complications, which was seen as her attempt to escape remand.
By Article 229 of the Constitution.
Her defense in the case was that the money she had accumulated was from her thriving agribusiness venture. She even shared pictures of her horticultural farm and invited the court to make a tour. This request will be rejected by the judge, saying, and I quote, "In my view, a site visit to a farm to establish whether or not such a farm can be the source of large sums of money deposited in bank accounts kilometers away would really be to chase after a mirage." End quote. In April this year, Omolo was dealt with yet another loss after the High Court ruled that she forfeits 33 million shillings to the state. Justice Mombi Ngugi ruled that the former PS had failed to explain the source of the funds, believed to be proceeds of crime. Her accounts are currently frozen as Omolo continues to challenge this ruling and also to fight corruption charges in the NYS scandal. One thing is for sure, though, she gets a shilling for her trouble. Charity Mwangi, NTV.
So 1 shilling, was it fair or not? We shall be talking more about some of those circumstances that we find in our workplace. But before we get to it, let's get to know those that will be helping us figure out this conversation. And that is George Masese. He is the acting head of legal and industrial relations at the Federal of Kenya Employers, that is FKE. Thank you for your time. We're also joined virtually by Jacqueline. Actually, she's in the other studio. Jacqueline Akelo, who is a labor and employment lawyer. Thank you for your time. And of course, we have Raymond Modama, who is the head of people and culture at ALN Kenya, and they are better known as Anjawal and Kana. Thank you for your time, lady and gentlemen. And I'll start off with you, George. I mean, this is one conversation that is a very, it hits home because we've all been an employee one way or another. And I think it's important that we actually define what is employee welfare.
Thank you, Gladys, for having me in your studio this morning. Employee welfare basically is what is paid or what is given to an employee over and above the basic wages, of course, that you have agreed. Remember that in an employment setup, there is a document called employment contract. So the Employment Contract basically provides, or rather if you look at the Employment Act, it provides for the basic minimum terms that an employee should enjoy while at work. But over and above that, then it becomes a part of a welfare to that employee, so that he can actually develop himself intellectually, emotionally, you know. Yeah, so that is basically, in simple terms, what we refer to as employee welfare.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, let's bring in the person in charge of people and culture, and this is Raymond Modama. What are some of these welfare facilities that George is talking about?
Thank you. Thank you for having me. So the issue of welfare is very, very important for any employer to have with employees. So the different welfare initiatives that an employer can have within the organization, and this varies from additional leave days over and above the 21 days that is stipulated by law. That takes care of employee welfare. You have things like compassionate leave, that is part of employee welfare. You have additional things like free lunch, that's part of taking care of an employee's welfare. You can talk about things that I summarize under heart share. Those are things that an employer does over and above the contractual obligation between that employer and the employee. So those are things that, in my opinion, actually begin to differentiate from one employer to another. So they can be varied. I mean, you see employee welfare initiatives ranging from giving gifts to employees on their wedding day, when they get children. That's part of employee welfare. And these are the things that create that unique psychological bond between the employer and the employee.
Okay, now there are different types of employee welfare, and I think let's bring in the legal mind in this conversation. And they're categorized by the law or by the will of the management, respectively. What are these, Jackie?
Thank you very much, Gladys, for having me. Now, when you talk about the welfare of employees, the Employment Act provides that there are certain minimum terms that must be met by every employer in an employer-employee agreement. We're talking about a contract of service, where this is a permanent employee as opposed to a contract for services. Now, some of these welfare benefits would include statutory deductions payable from the gross pay of this employee, such as NSSF and NHIF. Now, we do know that a happy employee is an employee who delivers, and therefore some of these are actually obligations pegged on the employer and not on the employee, just to make sure that these are actually met at source.
Okay, and I was reading up on there are those that are categorized as intramural and other extramural, which means inside the workplace, and those outside the workplace. What are these?
Now, when you talk about intramural versus extramural, employees have the right to be unionized. Now, some of these extramural benefits include benefits that accrue from collective agreements signed between employers and trade unions. Now, you would find that in a sector which has unionizable employees, that in the collective bargaining agreement, there are certain perks that employees who subscribe to these unions enjoy, such as better medical cover over and above what is stipulated as the minimum by law, such as transport benefits, housing allowance, and so on and so forth. So those are outside of the workplace, outside of the actual contract between the employer and the employee. And internally, there are also certain perks that the employer can give the employee just to motivate them. You'd find that there are certain workplaces where the employers have pension schemes, for example, have circles for these employees. All these are aimed at the welfare of the employee.
Okay, and saying that the biggest beneficiary to a happy employee is actually the employer. And George, you represent the Federation, and I'm wondering some of those benefits that you have seen out of a happy employee include?
Thank you. I think let's make the conversation a little bit simpler for listener or the people who are watching. The extramural and the intramural sometimes may be confusing to people because of the words.
Yeah.
So we have basically two types. If we want to look at it, we have the voluntary. Let's start from there, and then we have the statutory. Then when we go to now those ones that can be provided inside, within the work environment, and those that can be provided but they affect the outside world. For example, maternity leaves, those are now outside the work environment. The internally, of course, we have employers, as my colleague has said, that who provide free lunch. For an employee, that is now the internal aspect of looking at it. So statutory, of course, there are legislations that are provided for certain welfare at workplace, starting from the Constitution, starting from the Work Injury Benefit Act. Look at the welfare in the Occupational Safety and Health, which is actually the mother act in terms of welfare. That's the starting, the foundation of the welfare activities for employers. And then you look at the Employment Act, what it provides in terms of those welfare. Then you say, what is this that employers are now giving over and above, and why? Because it depends, as my colleague has said, depends from one company to another or one sector to another. And you cannot expect, of course, terms to be the same. Now, some of these benefits, like, for example, if we talk about maternity leave, we've seen most companies are providing more than 3 months. They are providing 4 months maternity leave, which is with full pay. The minimum is 3 months. Of course, there's some politics around the maternity leave and how it came, and how employers were also supposed to benefit from that. But of course, it becomes now part of a benefit that, for example, lactation rooms. It's a law now that you should have a place where mothers should go and breastfeed so those are statutory provisions, but they are not part of basically what you are doing, because initially, if you look at the history of industrialization, it was not part of the employer really to provide for an employee a place where they can do that. But now with the development and advancement of social rights, we've seen basically employers coming in to say, look, if I don't provide for my employees, then do I expect productivity? They have tested, and research has been done to establish that whether these benefits, when they are given to employees, do they really bring back the benefits? Is there a return on investment on this? Of course, others have argued to the contrary, but to be honest, and what I've seen, because I've participated in many collective bargaining agreements in this country, I've seen many welfare activities and facilities provided by employers, and I've seen a positive change in terms of how employees really attach themselves to that company, how they offer their services. So you could see that it is not only the employee who is benefiting, but the return on investment on those benefits actually is the employer who is benefiting, basically. Because if the employer was not benefiting, then he could not be having an extra, because you do costing for that benefit.
Yes.
And you ensure that once I give this benefit, I'm able to sustain this benefit for a longer period, so that you don't give a benefit today, tomorrow you remove that benefit. So therefore, you kill the morale of those employees, and then you have a high labor turnover from your company and all those things. So those are negative issues. So once you give, you must have a very clear managerial decision and a costing effect that you will be able to maintain that welfare facility or services that you are giving your employees.
Okay, and Jacqueline, I'm curious to know, what are the minimum standards? For example, in the workplace, should every employer provide perhaps water, sanitation, tea, stuff like that? What is the minimum standards?
Thank you, Gladys. Now, when you talk about the minimum standards, then we have to look at the health of the employee. We have to look at the working conditions of the employee. Now, every employer in Kenya is mandated by the law to make sure that the workplace is safe from any hazardous effects that may be injurious to employees. If an employee is working at a factory, for instance, does this employee have a helmet? This employee have proper gloves and all that, masks and whatnot? So some of these are just the very basic requirements. What are these requirements that an employee needs to work properly, that employee needs to be able to deliver to the employer? The place has to have proper sanitation. The place has to be clean. The place has to have running water. The place has to have proper toilets. So hygiene and health are key in the minimum requirements by law.
Okay, and Raymond, there are some companies, some that I know even in the media fraternity, that do not offer such basic amenities, and the employee has to go back to their pocket. If it is legally actually rubber stamped that these things should be there, then what should employees do in their capacity to ensure that they actually get the basic necessities?
Thank you, Gladys. See, you raise an important thing here. And what I have seen in most organizations is employees are actually not conversant or aware with their rights and some of the things that the employer should have in the organization. For example, it's interesting that an employee is actually supposed to provide water for an employee, but most employees don't know this. So number one, it's very, very important that where possible, the employer conforms with the regulation. Where that is not done, then it is important that employees are aware of what should be due to them. Now, the process of trying to lobby for some of these benefits is a different ballgame altogether, because employees must decide what is most important to them, and let's be realistic about it. Most organizations don't have these rooms, and employees know that. Most of the working mothers have to go to the car or to the parking, in the afternoons, and that's the reality. So I think this is a clarion call for employers. Very, very important. At the very least, yes, I know there is a cost to conforming to some of these requirements, but it is important at the very least, because you're not dealing with, like we say, you're not dealing with just a resource. You're dealing with a human being. You're dealing with people. It is very, very important that you treat them right. The whole process of negotiating and discussing with an employee is a different thing, and one that is very, very sensitive. And I guess this is a case. This is a case, Gladys, for human resource managers, because these are the individuals that are almost, stepping in between the employer and the employee. They understand what the law says. They understand what the employees need, and they are and should be the people that should be agitating for proper employee benefits and welfare.
Okay, and speaking of which, there is a friend who had sent a question very early in the morning, and they asked me to ask you, Raymond, who is really the employer in the organization? Human resource or the guy who signs the check?
They're asking who is the employer?
Yes, who is really in charge of employees?
Good question. The person who is really in charge of the employees is a gentleman signing or the lady signing the check. All right. And look, let's talk about the people agenda here, because I think indirectly that is what the person is asking. The people agenda is truly a leadership issue. Okay. Any organization where the leadership doesn't understand or does not prioritize the people agenda will have a serious challenge when it comes to not just retaining, but even attracting good talent. Now, the reality of work is most of the people in the leadership positions don't have the capability sometimes to understand these intricacies of human relations and employee relations. And that is a case for the HR heads and HR officers and HR managers, because they understand this. They have been trained to better understand the employee-employer relationship. So at the very least, the HR heads or HR managers should be able to secure buy-in, very, very important, present a case, compelling cases to the leadership team, so that you can make a strong case for the people agenda. This is actually a tango, Gladys. It's a tango between the leadership team and the HR heads in organizations. It's actually a tango.
Okay, now let's apply this conversation to the current times we're living in, and we are all facing a pandemic. And the question is, what are some of those industrial conflicts that have emerged during this pandemic, George?
Yes, we've had a lot of serious challenges, of course, in terms of managing the industrial relations during this time. And if you look at basically what the pandemic has done, it's like it has disorganized the structures of, let's say, industrial relations, because nobody expected that this pandemic will come. And when it came, actually the leadership of the Federation of Kenya Employers and the KOTU decided, like, if we don't come up with a certain structure of ensuring that the welfare of these employees is well taken care of, there is a likelihood that employers who may not be able to make decisions instantly at this particular time because there was nothing guiding them, then there is a likelihood that there are going to be many disputes arising out of this pandemic. But I can tell you for sure that if you go to the Ministry of Labor right now, you will see very minimal cases. What have we done? Or what did we do differently as a federation and the KOTU and the Ministry of Labor? We decided that we come up with a document we call the Memorandum of Understanding. And in that memorandum, basically, it's looking at the welfare of these employees. You know, the pandemic is not recognized in law. It's not in the Occupational Safety and Health. So then, how do you treat a sick leave? If somebody is infected by the pandemic, what happens? And so that's a challenge to an employer. And of course, I've received so many questions about that. And what has been my answer? My answer has been the social partners agreed that they treat this as a sick-off. And therefore, that is an extension of that welfare to really address that aspect of the gap that is there at the moment. And looking at, let's say, unpaid leave. You see, we don't have unpaid leave in law, all right? But what did we do? We said, yes, there should be unpaid leave, but then we must have flexible working times. Then we said, if you can be able to, you then extend, pay employees what we call a stipend, at least to assist them. Pay employees house allowance, at least to assist them. So during this period, employers and employees, of course, and what we told them is, look, don't make unilateral decisions. There's what we call workplace democracy, and there are structures. The Employment Act has provided that very well, and the social partners have provided that very well. The ILO conventions and recommendations have provided that very well. And therefore, what do you require? You can't take everything from an employee. You cannot take it away unilaterally if you have to take it. You have to discuss with an employee and ensure that employees are benefiting from this pandemic. For example, if we talk about maternity leave, you're on unpaid leave and you've gone to maternity or labor ward. What happens? So the conversation has been, what is the welfare that an employer should extend to employees? And I can tell you with a very practical examples that most employers, what they have done is that an employee who is on maternity, who is on unpaid leave at home and happens to go to labor ward, that is maternity, is actually brought back to maternity leave, and therefore is either paid the full salary or is paid a half salary or a certain amount if he was not being paid anything. So that now this cushions that employee from other effects, right? So some of these things, of course, these are the disputes that you expect to arise during this period. And I've seen most employers who are unable to understand, maybe asking, if the law does not provide, then why should I? You know? But then the question has been, can we preach the gospel of St. Paul to these people to understand that they are dealing with human beings and they are not dealing with objects? And therefore, most of them have understood that really these are the people we need after the pandemic, because you have used a lot of money to train them, right? And therefore, if you let them now go to the society and they become useless, when the pandemic is over, you need the same people. Or rather, it will be expensive for you as an employer because you have to re-employ, you have to retrain, you have to do. So extension of those benefits is basically to the benefit of an employer. Yes.
Okay, let me bring in Jacqueline on this one. Even as we talk about the impact of the pandemic, all industries have seen the impact of redundancies and terminations. So most organizations have fallen into very murky waters for not following laid down procedures. What should be considered by an employer before they lay off an employee?
Thank you, Gladys. Now, our Employment Act provides a very detailed procedure. And we also need to be alive to the fact that there is the COVID pandemic, there are redundancies, and then there is insolvency of an employer. And a lot of employers during this time are tending to mix all of this up. They're saying there's no money coming in, and therefore you're redundant, and therefore you're either going to be on half pay or you're going to go home. So I'm going to talk about the three different things separately. So when it comes to the COVID pandemic, I mean, this is something that disrupted the economy, disrupted business as we all know it. And therefore, what we are seeing as the actions being taken by most of these employers are basically what I would call a knee-jerk reaction to mitigate these business losses. You'd find somebody saying, okay, you're going to work from home, and therefore you're going to take half pay. And just like my colleague George here said, all of these terms have to be discussed between the employer and the employee. They have to be by consent of the employee. A lot of employees do not know that for an employment contract to be varied, to be amended, then this has to be done by the consent of the employee. Now, the consent can be two ways. Number one is express consent. That means in writing. A variation of that employment contract is signed by both the employer and the employee. The second way can be by implication. When the employer tells an employee, you're going to be on half pay for the rest of this year because of the COVID pandemic, and the employee says, okay, fine, and continues working normally, there's nothing in writing that has been signed by both parties, that can also be construed as agreement. So these are some of the things that employees need to be aware of, that your consent matters. For a contract of employment to be varied, your consent matters. When it comes to redundancy, the Employment Act is very, very clear on that. And redundancy has to be looked at separately from mitigating the effects of COVID-19 on a business. You know, COVID-19 is a passing cloud, as we are led to believe. And therefore, these measures need to be temporary measures and not permanent solutions, because a lot of employers may be taking advantage of the COVID-19 pandemic to try and downsize their employees at the office, their team, to try and go from full pay to half pay, so that becomes therefore the law going on because they want to make an extra profit. And these are some of these unfair labor practices. So the employee needs to know that your consent is key. When it comes to redundancy, it's a separate thing altogether. The employer has to give reasons. Redundancy is basically explained as the services offered by this employee have now become superfluous. They are no longer needed. they're in excess of the need of the company. And therefore, the employer has to be able to demonstrate, even if there's a selection of these employees who are to be declared redundant in phases, that you have to start with the ones who are of the least value to the employer, and you finish with the ones who are of the most value to the employer. That makes sense. So an employer has to give all these reasons, has to demonstrate that this employee is actually redundant. When it comes to insolvency, that is provided by the Act. So an employer cannot claim that, look, we are now insolvent, therefore we cannot pay you. Go home. No. That, according to me, is unfair termination, because insolvency has been provided for by the Act. The employers know what to do in a case of insolvency, and the Employment Act takes care of the employees in case of an insolvency by the employer.
All right, well explained there. I hope even as you watch and listen in on this conversation that you can talk to us if you have any questions in as far as employee welfare is concerned. And remember, our question of the day to you is, have you ever been fired unfairly? What happened? And did you seek legal redress? Talk to us. That hashtag new normal. And Raymond, even as we think about redundancies, insolvency, and of course the impact of COVID-19 and most of the companies having to let go of a huge part of their workforce, should the employer be obligated to look at the circumstances of each employer before they make this decision?
It's a good question, Gladys. According to the interesting statistics, according to the Employment, Labor and Relations Court, the statistics show that the two reasons that we have most disputes in court is, one, the certainty of underlying circumstances behind redundancies. That's one. And two, the procedural unfairness. So these are two things that are causing the most disputes between employers and employees. Very, very important. So what does this mean? Before an employer decides to lay off or to declare redundancies, that should be the last resort. You should exhaust everything else. And I'm very pleased to hear my co-panelists, George, and what Jack is also raising here, think about unpaid leave, think about pay cuts before you think of declaring redundancies. And the reason for that, if you look at the developing economies, Gladys, when you think about laying off an individual, this is not just about them. The family setup in developing countries, Kenya included, is that you most likely will have an employee who is taking care of a sibling here and there, a sister. So you're not just dealing with an individual, you're dealing with families, you're dealing with livelihoods. So it needs to be very, very well thought. Now, the most common pitfalls that I've seen is, one, because it is a difficult process both ways, most employers are afraid to communicate well and to communicate in good time. The law provides the procedure that should be followed. And I can just give a quick overview here. If you're planning to declare redundancy, it is important. Meet the employee or employees getting affected. Have a conversation. It can be an informal conversation. The law provides that before you do that, before you declare redundancies, it is important that you issue a notice of an intention to declare redundancies, at least 1 month before. Then have the conversation with the staff member. And in here, you can talk, you can discuss or think about trainings. Let the employee understand why you have to declare the redundancy. So it's a convivial process. It has got to be done in consultation. It's very interesting that the law, I believe Section 10, provides the need for consultation, but does not provide the need for consent when you're varying an employee's terms. However, case law, if you look at case law has almost led us to believe that you must seek consent. So it is very, very important. So the law is actually indirectly saying, hey, let the process be as humane as possible.
Okay. And I know the employers are caught between the rock and a hard place, especially in this pandemic. But George, should employers think about ways to cushion their employees, especially in cases of inevitable job cuts or job losses? Because there are those companies that now feel, okay, fine, this I'm beyond, help. I have to lay off.
Yes, I think the issue is that the pandemic is not a reason for an employer to declare employees redundant. It's not, and that has been very clear from the beginning. And that conversation, I think, all stakeholders have agreed on that. What the pandemic is done is that it has made the environment so volatile that the business cannot thrive. You see, some of the sectors, for example, the hospitality, they closed down their businesses. And, it was abrupt because in March, when the president announced that, when the first case actually was announced and the president had to put measures, it was very abrupt. And then you could see that there were no international visitors coming in, there were no tourists coming in, and the whole world actually was closed down. And the hotel industry really came to a standstill. So what then do you expect an employer to do? And if you say that employer maybe to say, I want to cut down employees by maybe through the redundancy, redundancy is very expensive, and you must have money for you to do that. So it was not an option. And then secondly, is this something that is going to stay with us forever? No. Scientists are working around the clock to ensure that we have a vaccine. So after that, then what happens? Because when you want to say you want to declare employees maybe some positions redundant, we don't declare employees redundant, of course. So those positions you are declaring redundant, there must be a reason for declaring those positions redundant. Now, employers have opted for a different option and have opted for a different route. The different route is that of ensuring that they cushion their employees against the effect of COVID-19. What are some of these things that employers have done? For example, as I had said earlier, and I think I want to repeat again, is that we have seen employers giving stipends to employees who are at home, right? We have seen employers coming up with the flex time, of course, the way employees are working. So you find like employees are working maybe like 2 weeks a month, or so it means they have to do all sorts of, they have come up with all sorts of programs to ensure that every person has food on the table. We have also extended the social protection aspects. For example, you are not working, but we have to ensure that we have your NHIF active, NSSF active. So if you are sick, you have an NHIF card, still you can still access medical services. Some of those things have been done by the employers. And of course, not only the employer, of course, even the government is an employer. And I had you ask the question, who is an employer? And maybe we'll come to that later. So you see, basically, when we talk about employee welfare, of course, talking about industrial relations and all that, you don't think of the legal way as such. Don't come and say legally this is what is. Industrial relations does not. It's beyond. It's looking at, like my colleague was saying, looking at the person from a humane way. So when you do all this and all this that employers have done, of course, to cushion employees during this period, there's no statutory provision for that. But they have done it out of their own goodwill, of course, to ensure that they cushion. That is the little they can. I mean, they could have done better if they could, but I believe that employers in this country have really done enough to employees, and I'm happy that I've not seen many disputes, and the reason as to why is because employees have come to appreciate that this pandemic has really hit the economy so hard, and we all need to come out of this pandemic together so that we don't kill the companies. Okay. Of course, there's a certain issue. You were talking about the issue of my colleague Omooloo was talking about insolvency. Of course, many companies during this period have gone insolvent. But then what is the remedy? The remedy is there, but the legal challenge is also there. We have, under the Employment Act, we have insolvent part, which now deals with when an employer is insolvent, then what happens to employees? There is a leeway to access, or there's a framework where you can access some money from NSSF. But up to now, the stakeholders have not come up with rules and regulations on how to cushion employees during that period when an employee is insolvent. So I think that is a big challenge. And going forward now, I think we need to have a very transparent conversation with every stakeholder to ensure that in future our employees, who are the workforce, who are the ones behind this economy running, that they are not really affected so much as they have been affected this time.
Okay, and Jacqueline, you talked about most of the disputes being as a result of ignorance, both from the employees and the employers. So let us know what are the legal measures that safeguard both employee and employer, especially in that contractual agreement.
Thank you, Gladys. Now, we start with the Constitution, because you have Article 41 of the Constitution that gives rights to employers, rights to employees, and rights to trade unions and organizations of employers. Now, when it comes to an employer, this is the person who's actually creating a livelihood for his entire staff. So now how can he be protected? In as much as you're going to come to the employee, who a lot of times people believe it is the employee who needs protection. The employer also needs protection. So there are certain measures that an employee can take against an employer if they feel, for example, they have been unfairly dismissed and that kind of thing. Now, for example, the Employment Act would provide for the procedure that if in terms of maybe summary dismissal, where there's gross misconduct, it gives some leeway for the employer in protecting their business. It gives leeway for them to summarily dismiss an employee. There are certain grounds given, for example, coming to work drunk and not being able to perform your duties, insubordination to your superiors at the workplace, and that kind of thing. So it's not only the employee who is protected, and also the employee is protected in that. Section 10 of the Employment Act talks about the minimums that an employment contract should or must have. And it provides that the employment contract must provide for the gross salary. This gross salary should actually be in conformity with the minimum wage regulations and laws of the country. Apart from this gross salary, which is in conformity with the minimum wage bill, then you also have to look at the health of the employee. Now, is there a health scheme under which the employee is? The Employment Act provides that there has to be an insurance scheme or a health scheme for these employees, so that when the employee falls sick, they're able to go get medical attention, bounce back on their feet, and come back and work. So these are just some of the minimums that are provided by our Act, that are provided by the International Labour Organization treaties and conventions. So there are a number of them, and these are all provided by the Employment Act and by regional international statute.
Okay, and before we take that short break, of course, we all saw that story of the former PS, Lilian Omooloo, who was actually given literally a shilling when she pursued that case of unfair dismissal. Was that fair according to your legal standing, Jackie?
Now, that's a very sensitive question. Thank you, Gladys. Now, I believe the court looks at many factors before it delivers judgment. One of the factors is there was a case in court, a corruption matter. So the employment matter is not independent of the history of this entire case. There was a matter of benefiting from proceeds of crime. Mm-hmm. And therefore, I believe the court looked at all of these issues because we've got a very progressive constitution, Gladys. A constitution which upholds integrity at the workplace, which upholds integrity of public officers. And the person you're talking about here was a public officer. And therefore, the court has the duty to make a declaration as to whether termination was unfair or fair. And the court did that. It made the declaration that indeed the termination of Lilian Omollo may not have been 100% procedural. But in the same breath, any consideration in law is good consideration, looking at all the factors. And therefore, giving the 1 shilling, according to me, was just for the law, for the court to say, look, we are going by the law, and we are actually compensating this person, because even 1 shilling is compensation. But hey, let us not forget that this person may have been found guilty of benefiting from proceeds of crime. So therefore, when you talk about public resources, we do not want our courts to keep giving public resources to people who may have been implicated in graft, may have been found guilty in graft proceedings.
We hear you, and we shall leave it at that, saying that it's still in court. And at this point, we take a short break, but I hear you're talking to us using that hashtag new normal, even as we seek to understand if you've ever been dismissed unfairly and what the circumstances were. If we can have some of that feedback on. Kali Lean says, yes, I was. I never sought legal help. Kali, I would want to understand why. Moses Gashoki says, yes, mjengo, unaamka kwenda kazi, unaambiwa yako ilisha. Moses, we hear you. Rashid says, yeah, these things are normal. We are always aware of them. I had to accept, and now I'm my own boss. I don't depend on someone to pay me salaries. Arab Cheptek says, I haven't, the company is not ready to even clear me. Just playing games here and there. I haven't resorted to legal action, but I have a timeline. If they don't, I will go for it. Orina Musa says, yes, during the COVID-19 pandemic, many people were fired unfairly even when they had an MOU with their employers. A lot of this coming up even in the discussion in as far as employees knowing their rights. Gracie Njesh says, too painful to talk about. We hear you, Njesh. Manu Udward says, yeah, I was fired because I did not toe the line with the boss mistress. Actually, in the letter it was reflected, and he fired me from the heart, not head. I did not seek legality since it's a waste of time. I moved on. Well, what we're finding out here is that seeking legal redress is actually not a waste of time. It is a pursuit of your own rights. And we'll talk more about that right after this break. Stay with us.
Kile shop iko pale hivi ya M-Pesa. Ndio shop atatuchapelea usiku. Maze pole amekuwa missing. Imemtafuta kila mahali simuoni.
Paul ni mteja.
Simekwambia story ni serious manzi.
Hajezi masimu. Wewe ni mwizi. Don't you dare. After Kenya nimekuona ukifanya na ule mwanaume, I think na qualify pia kukuita cheat. But kuhusu kutoambia Richard sioni kantaweza.
Kama unataka mbocha kwa nyamaze, lazima nyamazishwe.
Okay, tutamnyamazishaje?
Joy,
The procedure of reporting assets to Unclaimed Financial Assets Authority. Write an email to holders@ufaa.go.ke to request your profile to be created. Unclaimed Financial Assets Authority. Receive, safeguard, reunite.
Linda Assistia Mita na Absa, the official banking partner of the EPL in Africa. Stand a chance to win 1 million Kenya shillings every month when you deposit into your Absa personal or business account. That's Absa. That's Africanacity.
In prison, I thought a lot about you.
This is not acceptable!
Naina Rock,
And now there is milk that loves you. With Gold Crown lactose-free milk, you can enjoy the richness of natural cow's milk without any of the digestion discomfort. Gold Crown lactose-free. Milk that loves you.
Washing is not equal to cleaning. Cleasoft equals real clean.
Cleasoft cleans not just the surface of the clothes, removing stubborn stains easily. Effective antibacterial agent goes deep into the fibers, removing 99.99% of the hidden germ. Congratulations! You are the winner!
Thank you for staying with Your World. My name is Gladys Gashanja. Today we're focusing on employee welfare. Still with me, George Masese, Acting Head of Legal and Industrial Relation at FKE, Jacqueline Akello, who is a Labor and Employment lawyer, Raymond Mudhama, who is the Head of People and Culture at ALN Kenya. Thank you for staying with us. And at this point, Raymond, does an employer have a moral obligation of our former employee who is facing extreme hard economic times?
Well, good question. Moral obligation, yes. Yes. Why do I say this? Forward-thinking organizations have a relationship with employees even after that relationship ends, whether it ends out of a redundancy or it ends because an employee has resigned and looked for an opportunity or sought an opportunity elsewhere. What am I talking about? I'm talking about alumni. Organizations talking about an alumni organization. So what that indirectly means is that the relationship between an employer and an employee does not end when an employee leaves the organization. So yes, there is a moral obligation. And some of the things that I've seen organizations doing, especially, it's interesting that we've had a lot of CSR initiatives from employers. But here's the thing. Before you think about CSR to the communities, think about CSR to the people who work with you or have worked with you and you had to separate with. So keeping close tabs with employees who have worked with you and have left is very, very important. Check on them. I mean, and I know organizations that have been giving a monthly food rations, a monthly food and an amount that is sufficient for a home and a family of 4 every month. And they have been doing this even for people who have since left the organization or who are declared redundant. I have seen that taking place. And that's very, very important because we do appreciate on one hand that employers have gone through a difficult time. That's a fact, especially during this time. And they've had to make very uncomfortable decisions. But the tide can change. And when things look up for employers, please consider, that's what we're saying. Please think about the people who work with you. Rethink about the people who once engaged with you. 2, there is the issue of outplacement services. And we've talked about the moral obligation. Outplacement services is where an employer knows that, look, I can't keep you for whatever reason it is. It could be out of a redundancy, it could be performance-based. But they say, look, the relationship between me and you may not be working, but I can assist you to get a job elsewhere. Now, Gladys, this has taken place. Forward-thinking organizations do this. You might have a staff member who is currently on a performance improvement plan, who you intend to declare redundant, but you take the time, ask them to polish up their CV. Then through the networks available, especially within the leadership team, please send out their CVs out there. Help them get jobs. You'll be surprised, Gladys, how many people have gotten jobs out of these benevolent acts by employers. So yes, employers have a moral obligation.
Interesting perspective. Now, George, in the case of companies that have leeway to rehire, you know, some of those colleagues, when now they find their footing again post-COVID or even as the economy opens, whom should you prioritize back on the workforce? Is there a parameter that actually considers this?
No, there's no parameter really in terms of what you should consider legally. But the companies have their own policies, of course. And, you know, from the HR perspective, you can say that is the time to do screening and take the right people, because you must get the right people for the right jobs and people who fit into the culture of your organization. As my colleague has said about maybe, let's say, termination or redundancy or somebody on PIP and all that, you know, a termination or a dismissal is not a death sentence. And it's actually saying, look, you may not be able to work here because of the culture. It's not that you're a bad person. It's not that you can't perform. No, you can't perform somewhere else. You can. But here, it means you are not able to meet the standards that we have. You are not able to follow the rules and regulations we have. You are not able to fit into the workplace culture. So therefore, that's why we are releasing you to go and find another place where you can work. And that's why he's saying you should look for, you should send out CVs for these people to other places they can get jobs. And more so during redundancy, basically what happens is during that notification period and during the period that now you are discussing with employees, these are some of the things that employers usually do. You know, they try to do counseling, you know, psychosocial support to employees, financial literacy, because if they are going to get, let's say, a golden handshake, how are they going to spend their money and all that? So when you want to rehire these people back, people you have left, the guideline should be your policy, your culture at workplace, and the skills that you require. You just don't get in everybody. And I think, to be very honest, that's the best chance for an employer who is seriously looking at his business and wants to grow, should consider as a good opportunity. I want to be very honest to everybody here, that if you know that you want to rehire, then have a policy guideline and have some guidelines that you're going to look at. That's where the HR team comes in handy to assist the company.
Yes. And Jacqueline, definitely there are some disputes that have occurred or come up during this pandemic, and even as the year wears on, there's some companies that will still be shedding. The question is, what are some other dispute resolution options out there apart from going to court for both employer and employee?
Thank you, Gladys. Now, we have labor officers in Kenya. And this office is provided for by the Act, the Employment Act. Many people may not know this, but in every region there is a labor officer, so that before somebody actually runs to court, they may want to go to the labor officer to look at the disputes at hand and advise. Another avenue is alternative dispute resolution. I mean, it's all about social justice. It's all about the welfare of both the employer and the employee. We are not at war. It's about the two of them, you know, having dialogue, sitting down and discussing, so that the employer says, look, this has been hard on me in this and this and that way, and the employee say, this has been hard on me in 1, 2, 3 ways. Now, are we able to meet halfway? If there's a trade union involved, can that trade union, the officials, be called upon to help looking at this dispute before it goes to court? Because, I mean, our constitution right now allows for anybody and everybody to go to court, and the Employment and Labor Relations Court has jurisdiction. However, before one actually goes to court, it is good for them to consider, number one, amicably settling the issue. Is just about dialogue And number two, it's going to the labor office before you actually go to court.
And if you notice, some of the feedback we carried earlier on before we took a break, most people do not pursue legal redress because of the expense of the same. So are you saying these other options are probably cheaper and more accessible to many?
Thank you, Gladys. That's a very good question. And that might actually be a myth, because even when it comes to provision of legal services, there are two aspects to it. There is the legal fee paid to the lawyer. There's also the filing cost in court. Now, the way the Employment and Labor Relations Court fees are actually structured are so as to enable the common mwananchi to accept these facilities. And also, you don't even have to go through a lawyer. Of course, there are benefits of going through a lawyer, because this lawyer knows what they're doing. They have been doing this for some time, and they're able to advise you in accordance with the latest jurisdiction of the courts. But if you look at the filing fees, for example, that is just one aspect of the Employment and Labor Relations Court, they are substantially lower than filing fees in other courts. This is just to help or enable employees actually benefit from the services of the court. And also when it comes to the lawyer, it's all about discussing these fees. Nothing is cast in stone. Because just as I said, nobody is at war here. It's all about the discussion. Many people out there may think once you go to a lawyer's office, you're going to be asked for huge astronomical sums of money before even anything is done. That is not necessarily the case. It's about going to this lawyer, discussing your matter. Many times I and even other lawyers in the country have taken on pro bono work. Pro bono basically means we do not charge legal fees. So it's all about talking. It's all about coming out of that cocoon. It's just a myth that these legal services or court services may be inaccessible.
And clearly a lot more sensitization of this information you're giving us today needs to be done, because most employees do not know where to start. Now, Raymond, for those that remain, now that the company has been shaken up, it has had to shed a huge workforce, what are the parameters to consider while working with a lean team, not to ensure that you also do not overwork them and cater for their well-being?
Yeah, good question, Gladys. Now, of course, and especially now where organizations are really thinking about working with lean teams and, as much as possible, then the conversation about welfare is perhaps more pronounced now than ever before. So an employer needs to think about things like flex or flexible work arrangements, where you either have a 4-day work week, for example, and you have the 5th day as a resting day. Think about recognition opportunities. Very, very, very important that employers come up with clear recognition platforms and initiatives for the employees. What am I talking about here? There's what we call duvet days. For example, if your team members have worked really hard for a couple of days, nothing stops an employer from giving them 2 days off, for example, an afternoon off as a duvet day. Go home, don't answer mails, go home and relax. And that is not a leave day. It is not a leave day. Some of the things we call duvet days. The training opportunities, especially now that virtual trainings are prevalent more than ever before, give your employees an opportunity to upskill them, make them better. The need for also employers to create a stronger bond with their employees is very, very important. Get to know what your staff members are going through. Your focus groups are very, very important. Engagement opportunities. When we talk about welfare, what is happening in your employees' world? Celebrate birthdays. These things are important. They may not cost you much, but they mean a lot. When a staff member gets a baby, celebrate. Send an email to all your staff and say, hey, you know what? We have a new addition to our family in X and X organization. Commend them. Send them a bouquet of flowers. It's going to cost you 2,500 shillings. It's going to matter a lot to them. Send them diapers. It may cost you 5,000. It matters a lot. Take time. Write a letter. Get a card. It's 200 shillings. Have every team member sign on it. These are the little things, and this is what we call heart share, Gladys. Heart share. These are the things that really matter. And these are the things that create a psychological bond between employers and employees. It is not enough, like we say, to pay your people well. It is not enough.
Very well said. And George represents the employer, and we are also at a time where organizations are also rehiring or hiring. What is the importance of inclusive employment, especially at a time where you have to work with a lean team?
The first thing is, you see, during this pandemic, a lot has happened in terms of people have embraced technology, and it's going to be our new life that we are going to embrace. People are working from home now. We don't need people in the offices who are doing sales. Really, why should I have a room for people doing sales? And therefore, do I require all this number? Really, no, I don't require all of this number. And therefore, opportunities now must be opened for others who are not going to get these jobs back, for maybe do self-employment, so that we don't close their mind thinking like, what is going to happen now is that I have to get hired, otherwise I can't do anything. So the positive side of it is that the COVID-19 has introduced a new way of thinking, a new way of doing business. And the lean team that we have right now, we must ensure that really we don't overwork them. That is one. The fear, of course, during this period again, for those who are left working, is that they are going to do a lot for a lesser wage. And that is killing the morale. But as Raymond has said, you don't really work for money, There are other benefits employers should now introduce to their employees, which now can motivate them, even if it's a lean team, but motivates them to work hard and work more. But of course, again, considering that a human body is not like a car engine. Even if a car engine has its limits. So if you want people to be productive at workplace, there are two things, and this is what researchers showed, that in a day, people should work for 8 hours. There should be a lunch break. Why should we do that? Okay. Why don't we work for 12 hours then? Because people used to work for those 12 hours or 15 hours. But at the end of the day, it was found to be counterproductive. Accidents occur because of exhaustion, and people are not able to think creatively because of being overworked. So a lean team is good, but ensure again that you put in some mechanism to ensure that you don't overwork these people. Okay? In as much as we are embracing technology. So rehiring people back is a good idea, but I'm not going to advocate for hiring for purposes of hiring, but hire what you can really manage as an employer. And then what we are saying is, during this period, a very broader conversation with the government. For example, the Concert City and all these other places should be opened up quickly right now because of this idea of technology. I've seen many young people going online and doing business on and all that. So this is a good idea, instead of everybody focusing that we have to go and get employment. Really, that is closing the mind of these young people. And in any event, if you look at the skills nowadays, there's a skill mismatch. And that is why most people don't get those jobs. So they should do what they are better at, instead of waiting at home and saying, I need to be rehired, I need to go back to work, I need to do that. I think the conversation should be, what should we ask the private sector to do to encourage people for self-employment? What the government should do right now to encourage people for self-employment. And I think that will make the economy more vibrant than where we are maybe shaping this young generation too.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Now, Jackie, I have 5 minutes to bring this conversation to an end, so I need brief parting shots from each and every one of you. I'll start off with Jackie. At a point where we have realized many people do not understand their rights when it comes to employee benefits and some of the things that they can reach out to in as far as their welfare is concerned, what would you suggest coming from a legal standpoint?
Thank you, Gladys. What I would suggest are two things. Number one, not many of us may be aware, but the Law Society of Kenya holds every year, once a year, for a whole week, a legal awareness clinic at the courts where anybody can walk in and speak with lawyers and speak with stakeholders in the judicial and legal fraternity and speak with officials of the Law Society of Kenya and actually ask their questions and get responses and get suggestions and get professional opinions at no fee at all for an entire week. Number two is change of mentality, because like I said, it actually is a myth in many people out there that legal services are not attainable. Going to court is not an option. It's a myth. So I'd like for more and more Kenyans to actually come out of that cocoon and just walk to the next lawyer's office, speak freely, ask your questions. It doesn't cost anybody anything. And of course, if it costs anything for consultation, you will be let know right at the door. But my point here is change of mindset.
All right. Thank you for that. Raymond, very briefly, we're living at a time where employees are dealing with so much. So a lot of mental health issues have come up, and you talked about hardship coming from the employee. How can we ensure we consolidate all this to make a happy employee and, of course, by extension, a happy employer?
So three things very, very important. One is the wallet share. Pay your people well. Pay your people the best you can. That is wallet share. Heart share. Create a psychological bond with your people as much as you can. And you realize some of these initiatives regarding heart share are not expensive, but they mean a lot. It could actually be the differentiator between one organization to another. Three, mind share. Have a culture within the organization that transfers knowledge from one group to another, one generation to another. Where possible, I'd encourage employers to grow organically. Very, very important. You're able to develop people within. I think with these three building blocks, Gladys, employers will be happy and employees will be happier.
Very well said. And of course, George, looking at it from an employer's point of view, what should employees or rather employers consider even as they handle their workforce?
We want to encourage employers to have this attitude of looking at an employee as a whole, okay? And we want to encourage, of course, we encourage them to extend these welfare facilities and services to employees and create the next generation of skilled workers who can be able to move this economy forward. If we don't take care of our employees, definitely what we are saying is we can't compete with China. We can't compete with South Africa because these countries are ahead of us because of what they have done to their human resource capital. And as employers, we're saying we are ready to do that. We are partnering with all the stakeholders to ensure that we build a very strong and innovative human resource that can move this country to the next 2030 vision.
Okay, very well said. George Masese, acting head of Legal and Industrial Relations Federation of Kenya Employers, Jacqueline Akello, who is a labor and employment lawyer, and Raymond Mudama, head of People and Culture at ALN Kenya, better known as Anjawala and Kana. Thank you so much for your time. I am told we still have a lot of feedback coming from you, even as we asked you the question, have you been fired unfairly? Let us know what happened. And did you seek any legal redress? Tumbi Austin says labor laws are only applicable whenever the employer is benefiting. Actually, Jackie says that is not true. Shadi says Kenyan employers only care about their wealth and not their employees. Well, as George has said, it is important that employers look at employees as human beings. Maureen Jackie says, yes, it was an addendum that was served to all employees only to realize that some selected employees were actually hired back. How would you term this? Is it redundancy or because as a matter of fact, my employer had sent the entire company on a compulsory leave late last year. Come this year, we are served with an addendum 3 months after resuming work. Interesting perspective there. We have another here, Mwangi Kuria, who says, actually, every company should have a safety officer trained and qualified as per the British Act. Kelvin Warui says, employee welfare is a healthy working conditions and a salary with a capital letters there. Well, thank you for speaking to us. We'll still continue sampling some of your comments as we go on with the broadcast. But we take a short break on Your World. When we return, I'll be joined by my colleague Julians Amboko, who is NTV's business editor, even as he takes us through a conversation on renewable energy, sustainable production of the same, and he will be hosting one of the regional directors or AFDB Eastern Africa, that is Nena Noafubo. Stay with us.
Maji mdosi wangu ametupa simu yangu ndani ya maji.
Mdosi wako kwa sawa? Venye Nkirota ameniambia ajui na akimpigia simu ashiki. Hi guy, what
Women who deserve more. Moped is now in Kenya and more than 40 countries. With its nylon-free surface, new Moped has unique softness and up to 100% protection. Your skin will love it.
Here at NMG, we are working very hard to ensure your favorite publications, Daily Nation, Business Daily, Taifa Leo, and the East African are readily available. In a bid to support the efforts to prevent the transmission of COVID-19, NMG has ensured our staff, our distributors, and their staff adhere to set guidelines. At our printing plant, all staff are required to wash their hands before entering the factory and must be wearing a mask. All workers either change their clothes on entering the factory or wear an overcoat. We are keeping doors open to avoid our staff touching door handles repeatedly. With our automated printing, contact with the newspaper is kept to a minimum, and at the packing process, the staff observe social distancing. Vehicles used to transport the newspapers are disinfected daily before the newspapers are loaded, and our delivery staff all wear masks and wash their hands regularly. Our vendors ensure that they sanitize every time they handle money and wear their masks at all times. NMG is proud to be able to safely meet your information needs. Stay safe, stay informed with our favorite NMG publications. Finding meaningful stories takes more drive and passion.
Fathers' involvement in maternal and reproductive health is slowly becoming a game changer.
Getting to the truth takes more determination.
Hakuna mtu ameshikwa.
Hakuna. Nilikuwa kilio changu ni watoto wanapata shida chakula. Lakini nimeona Kenya yetu watu wamenishika mkono.
Finding real solutions takes more understanding.
Shortage of teachers, lack of textbooks.
Afadhali mtoto awe chini ya miti badala ya awe na chupa ya glue kwa mapua.
And NTV investigates, leads to impact.
This building here has got its fair share of criminals.
Who are these COVID billionaires?
Corruption related to PPE, it's actually a murder.
So these are patients with cerebral palsy.
From what I saw being aired in NTV, it really broke my heart.
NTV, stories that impact you.
Jifunze kukohoa na kupiga chafya na rafiki yako Grover. Hatua ya kwanza, tambua kuwa unakaribia kupiga chafya. Hatua ya pili, elekeza kiwiko chako kwenye pua na mdomo. Hatua ya tatu, Gesundheit. 1, 2, 3. Kumbuka kukohoa kwenye kiwiko chako au kwenye karatasi ya shashi ambayo unaweza kuitupa kwa haraka.
Job went through many troubles, but the Bible says that at the end of it, he was more blessed, he was stronger, and he was more wealthy than he had ever been. This is our prayer, this is our belief, that when this is all over, we will be stronger, we will be more blessed, we will be a greater nation than we ever been. God bless you and stay safe.
As we take personal responsibility and adhere to all government regulations and guidelines in relation to coronavirus, may we remember that God is faithful. He will not allow us to be pressed, crushed, and perplexed by the epidemic to a point of total destruction. 2 Corinthians chapter 4 verse 9 teaches us that we may be hard pressed on every side, but shall not be crushed. We can be persecuted, but shall not be abandoned. We can be struck down, but shall not be destroyed.
Thank you for staying with Your World. My name is Gladys Gashande. Now, I am joined by my colleague, that is NTV's business editor, Julian Samboko, even as he takes us through a conversation on sustainable production of renewable energy. Julian?
Many thanks, Gladys. As you rightly pointed out, we are talking about the financing of renewable energy projects. Now, many of us appreciate this kind of projects are capital intensive. And the question always is, how exactly do we mobilize capital to finance this kind of undertakings and ensure that power is generated not just in an environmentally friendly way, but in a sustainable manner from a financial optic? Now, to make sense of this, I'm joined by Madam Nwabufo Nena, who is the Acting Director General for East Africa Regional Development at the Africa Development Bank. Welcome on set, Madam Nena. And just to kick off our conversation, walk us through how the portfolio for AFDB as far as financing renewable energy products looks like.
Okay, thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be on this program. You know, the bank's energy policy for Africa is twofold. The first one is to support African countries have access to modern, affordable, reliable energy services and infrastructure. And the second is to assist these countries develop a socially, economically, and environmentally sustainable energy sector within the continent. And this two-pronged approach is also critical to ensuring that countries fulfill the UN SDG 7, which is access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all by 2030. The bank's financing, therefore, goes to ensure that countries achieve energy security, that they increase electricity access at most affordable cost, that they ramp up the use of renewable energy, enhancing environmental and social compliances in implementing this, that they increase energy sector governance through budget support operations to the sector, and they enhance inclusivity in financing and development of the sector by crowding in. So we try to crowd in grants and concessional financing, both on the private sector and the public side, and also in terms of the public-private partnership projects, so that we can overall reduce the overall cost of energy for countries in Africa. And to expedite this, the bank's policy and accelerate access for all, in 2016, the bank unveiled what we call the New Deal on Energy for Africa. And this targets universal access to clean forms of energy for the people of Africa by 2025, utilizing both on-grid and off-grid solutions for home solar systems. The bank is also increasingly looking at how to support clean cooking and energy efficiency operations in the countries across the continent. Thank you.
Great. And speaking about crowding in private investors coming into this renewable energy space, many will tell you that they need entities like AFDB to de-risk this kind of projects. Just speak to us about the role of AFDB as far as this is concerned.
Okay, generally, the bank funds, we have many instruments that we use to fund operations. But I'll start by saying that the African Development Bank, we have both our commercial and concessional loans with very flexible terms. But even our commercial loans, because we're a AAA rated institution, our commercial loans, the terms can be also called concessional because we get very good rates from the international capital markets. For the governments, we have very good grace periods depending on the type of loan, 5 to 8 years, and tenors can be up to 25 to 30 years. So we also offer grants both to government and the private sector, especially when it comes to as we can encourage renewable energy and climate change adaptation to energy finance. But what we try to do, we do that also for the government and for private sector, is that we have what we call credit enhancement facilities. We have the partial risk guarantees that we use to support the obligations of state entities when we finance them to investors in the power infrastructure. The bank actually used this facility for the Turkana and the Menengai geothermal projects that we financed in Kenya. Specifically for the private sector as well, we have the partial credit guarantees, the PCGs, which we use to support private sector project developers so that they can access commercial loans at better financing terms. So we come in to provide a sort of guarantee, and with our AAA backing, they get better access and better terms when they take commercial loans.
Absolutely, and the renewable energy projects would be projects which are long-term in nature by way of recouping your investment. Many are just curious to understand, how does the return on investment look like from where you sit?
Well, you know, the return on investment for any investor, for us, and that's why a lot of governments prefer to come to us as MDBs, and a lot of private sector will want to do business with us. Because when you are giving a loan with a grace period, for example, for governments at 5 years, 8 years, and then a tenor of 25 to 30 years maximum, you find that the cash outflow for the government or the investor is minimal. So, and therefore, during the grace period, they have the time to do the construction, they have the time to get the system working. And then once they start paying, the longer tenor that they get from MDBs gives them the opportunity to match their cash inflows slowly with their cash outflows. You can imagine when you're paying a loan of $10 million over 20 years, whereas against when you go into the commercial bank that will lend you the same amount for 2 or 3 years. So because a lot of times, such investments are capital intensive. And so you need that time to be able to gradually invest and begin to get the returns on your investment and gradually pay slowly over a longer period of time. So the kind of terms that we give actually make it easier, and also by implication, it makes it cheaper also for the consumers because the investor is not in a hurry to recoup their money because they are paying out a lot of money on the loans that they have borrowed.
Madam Nene, if you could walk us please through the partnerships that AFDB has with the Kenyan government within the renewable energy space. I know you've already touched on this, but just give us a sense of how this is working for you.
Okay, as at the end of the financial year ending of June 2019, renewable energy sources accounted for about 87% of the energy supplied in Kenya. Wind accounted for about 10%, hydro about 33%, geothermal about 44%. Solar sources were still quite low. It was at below 1% because the Garissa solar power plant only started operation in 2019, but definitely we think that solar will pick up with time. Of course, Kenya has a very huge renewable energy potential, and with geothermal, with wind, and with solar. And the bank has, as much as possible, tried to engage with the government in recognizing that, in trying to make sure that we can work within the energy policy of the government, which recognizes that renewable energy supply can meet the needs of the country. So what we have done, the key renewable energy operations we financed by the bank with the government and other financing areas include the 310 megawatts Turkana Wind project, which is a private sector investment that is delivering about 10% of the total national energy consumption based on the reports that were issued as at the financial year end of June 2019. We also have the KenGen 168 megawatts Kiamberi hydropower project, which was actually the first energy project that was approved by the bank, and this has been in operation since 1988. Thirdly, we have the Menengai geothermal project, which actually has a capacity of 400 megawatts to be implemented in phases. And the first phase is partially completed, which is the phase one of the steam gathering that was financed by the bank. We have the Kopere solar power, which is in the early stages of implementation, and to ensure also that energy generated by these and other projects reach the consumers. The bank has financed the transmission system reinforcement project, and also we are financing the last mile connectivity program that is targeting about 600,000 new connections when it's completed. We also have the regional grid interconnections that we are financing. There is the one between Ethiopia and Kenya, and there is also between Kenya and Tanzania. And these are part of the Pan-African grid interconnection that links countries across Africa so that power supply can be easily purchased and distributed across countries with excess supply and competitive pricing. The Egypt-Sudan angle is complete. The Sudan-Ethiopia is complete. So when the Kenya-Ethiopia is completed, that joins in. Then we also have the Kenya-Tanzania, and there is also the Tanzania-Zambia one that is also currently under implementation. So the bank has naturally had a very, very long history of supporting the government in renewable energy. Since we started working with the government, we've actually done only one non-renewable energy project, and that was during the drought season. So it was an emergency operation to help support the government. Every other project that we are doing with the government is definitely on renewables. Thank you.
Now, the list of projects you've given now leads me to my next question, because a couple of DFIs I talked to about this conversation, they will tell you that whereas they have a robust war chest in terms of financing, it is the pipeline of projects which now becomes not as robust as they would have desired to. Is this a challenge you are also facing?
Well, sometimes, yes, it becomes a challenge, but I think over time that we see a lot of interest from the private sector. The only thing is that the level of agreements that the private sector will have to go through in order to start generation and selling to the government sometimes creates, it takes a long time. The implementation is not as short as we would like it. One of the things that the governments are looking at now is to see how they can use the auction facilities to see how they can get this faster done and also to get it cheaper. I think sometimes you may say it's a challenge, but I think currently in the bank, we do have quite a list of pipelines that we are looking at. Sometimes also you have pipelines, but it's the financing because it requires a lot of financing and it's the time that it takes to do the preparations, you have to do the due diligence, you have to do the environmental and social safeguards because a lot of those projects affect communities and you have to make sure that you get it right in terms of its impact on people's livelihoods and its impact on the environment. But definitely, I think there are a lot of projects that we see in Kenya and across Africa. Sometimes actually is financing that we are looking for.
All right. And what's your outlook for the energy landscape in the region? And why I ask this is because we have some significant developments happening, for example, in Ethiopia. Kenya, of course, has a number of projects. What's your outlook like for energy in the region? East Africa, I mean.
Well, our outlook is that there are, like you said, there are a lot of opportunities for development of renewable energy. And of course, as you know, the conversation across the world has been that renewable energy is the right way to go. We are seeing very good developments in places like Ethiopia. As a matter of fact, Ethiopia is currently producing renewable energy options at less than 5 cents per kilowatt and hour. We also, even within Kenya, KenGen and GDC have done very well. They're working with a lot of governments in helping them develop their geothermal and aspects. Here within Kenya, we are looking at how we can support the government over time to ramp up the development of Rift Valley geothermal fields for energy production. The wind and the solar generation capacities in Kenya and across the region is very, very high. We are seeing, like I said, there is the Pan-African interconnection that we are working on and supporting Kenya and supporting Tanzania and Ethiopia. So, and there is a lot of power agreements. We have Ethiopia, Djibouti connection that we are working on. We have Ethiopia, Kenya that we are supporting. We have Kenya, Tanzania. So there is a lot of collaboration. And I think what that is doing, and with all the technologies that are coming on board, the cost of generation is coming drastically down. We went from about 15 cents in the past. Today, at least in Kenya, we're about 7 cents. And we're looking forward to the time that is going to drop below 5 cents. Just like it has happened in Ethiopia. But the most important thing is that the power agreements that are going on and the interconnection across countries, and as the prices come down, you find that sometimes countries will be buying from their neighbors at cheaper options. So the investment, the level of investment is being shared across the region. And I think these are exciting times. And it ties into the climate change conversation because when we have renewable energy opportunities across Africa, then we are also going to contribute. That is also going to contribute significantly in bringing down the pollution as Africa moves away from fossil fuel generation into renewables. And these are definitely exciting times, and we look forward to working with governments on this.
Madam Nena, it's like you read my mind, because when you talk about agreements between countries, I want us to talk about the aspect of regional power pools and how they are impacting, one, the financing, and two, just the energy landscape by and large in Africa. Talk to us about that, please.
Well, like I said, we are seeing a lot of regional power pools coming together, and the bank is actually financing some of these. The bank is also financing some regional engagements that are intended to enhance collaboration between countries and also to enhance the capacities of these countries to deliver renewable energy at affordable cost to their various countries. So like I said, these are exciting times, and we continue to work with the governments, and we continue to work with the countries. We have, like I said, we are working on a project between Ethiopia and Djibouti. We are working on Kenya and Ethiopia. We are working on Kenya and Tanzania. There's Tanzania, Zambia. So these power pools these are opportunities actually for countries to come together and collaborate and to look at where the economies of the scale lie in order to produce and purchase at a cheaper option instead of everybody trying to generate their own power. And then, over time, you're going to see that the cost of investment and the cost of purchasing these things are going to level out. And we are definitely looking forward to this, to tapping into this opportunity to support many countries. We are also working with all the global climate funds to support this. We are working with the Sustainable Energy Fund for Africa to support all this. We are working with the African Renewable Energy Fund also to support all these investments through the regional power pools. And the bank is also supporting by providing capacities and also supporting these regional power pools as well.
All right, and some investors I speak to will mention that one of their key concerns is the potential mismatch between supply and demand, in the sense that we might put out so much energy and yet the demand, of course, might not meet up to the existing supply. Is this a concern you would share?
Well, I think yes and no. We have to realize that a lot of Africans still don't have energy. A lot of Africans still don't have electricity. And even the level of penetration for even clean cooking is much lower. So and that's why the bank also, in addition to supporting like the geothermal generation, we are also doing the last mile connectivity with many countries. And what the last mile connectivity does is that it enables the countries and enables the energy companies, the utility companies in the countries to be able to connect many more people. In Kenya today, we have about 15 million people that are not yet connected. And as we are able to work through the last mile connectivity to connect these people, then the energy that is being generated is going to be used up. But most importantly also, we are talking about the fourth industrial revolution. You cannot industrialize if you don't have energy. And if you don't have good energy sources, you're also not going to attract foreign direct investment. Or even the local investors are going to be handicapped in terms of what they can do. So it's not when people are going to be setting up the industry that will start setting up the energy infrastructure. It's important that the energy infrastructure is there. And then that's also because when an investor is coming, they're looking at many options. And one of the key things that they need is energy. So I think the energy surplus that may be arising is going to be a key, and as the prices drop, is going to be a key driver in bringing in investors, because they know that Africa, some of the African countries already have some of the important infrastructure that is needed. I think one of the key things we should also be looking at is how to cut down the costs. It's not just the excess production. There are a lot of losses that are ongoing, that happen within the energy landscape. And the bank is also working with government and organizations to see how we can support them with technologies and opportunities to cut down these losses. Because as these are cut down and also energy, last mile connectivity happens, then you find that the cost of energy, the final cost of energy to the consumer is going to be brought down.
It's a good point you raised there, and as we close, really, you mentioned the very critical element of distribution and transmission losses. Just give us very briefly, what's the bank doing about this?
Well, we are looking at opportunities definitely to work with the KPLCs to see how we can give them the capacity to use modern technology, upgrade what they have in order to cut down on their losses. And once that is done, we hope that it will also, because what is happening is that all those losses that are happening today, is the cost is being, placed on top of what the customers, consumers pay. So we are working with governments. We are looking at how we can provide them with the capacity. We are looking at how we can provide them with the funding to be able to get modern technologies that will reduce the losses that is happening today within the system.
All right, Madam Nwabufonena, thank you so much for creating time to speak to us on this critical subject of financing renewable energy projects. And we have been focusing on the subject of renewable energy financing, the challenges being faced, the opportunities across the region. I now hand you over back to Gladys Kashanja.
Thank you, Julian Samboko. Definitely a very informative conversation there on renewable energy. Well, that's it from us here on Your World, but tomorrow we'll be back. And tomorrow we'll be focusing on pregnancy and infant loss, an experience that goes beyond the physical and has a huge impact on the mental health of both parents. But even as we speak about the coping mechanisms, how can we prevent pregnancy and infant loss? Well, join us tomorrow morning from 7 a.m. See you then.